$40? Evelyn Grant repeated, as though Daniel Mercer had placed an insult on her glass desk. You expect my company to pay this? It is the cost of the replacement switch. Then consider it a favor. Daniel did not argue. 3 days later, that unpaid switch would cost her $12 million. Rain streaked the windows of Grant Dynamics, turning the Chicago skyline into blurred towers of silver and blue. Inside the executive conference room, polished screens glowed above a table long enough to seat 20 people, while the low hum of climate control mixed with the distant chime of elevators. Daniel stood near the door in worn work boots, holding a small paper invoice between grease-marked fingers. He was 39, broad-shouldered, tired around the eyes, and still wearing the navy jacket he had pulled on before dawn. A faded pink thread circled one cuff where his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, had tried to repair it the night before. Across from him sat Evelyn Grant, the Billionaire chief executive officer whose face appeared on magazine covers, airport billboards, and financial news broadcasts. Her white suit was flawless. Her posture was exact. Even her silence felt expensive. Earlier that morning, one of the cooling control panels beneath Grant Dynamics' new battery testing facility had failed. The company's engineers had blamed the software. Daniel had found the real problem in 12 minutes. A cracked $40 pressure switch that was sending false readings into a system scheduled for full production by Friday. He replaced it, tested the line twice, and warned the plant supervisor that the surrounding circuit needed a complete inspection before the next heavy load. The supervisor thanked him. Accounting rejected the invoice. Evelyn had summoned him upstairs after hearing that an outside repairman was refusing to leave without payment. The service call was covered, she said, sliding the bill back across the desk. The part was not authorized. Daniel glanced at the paper but did not reach for it. The old switch could not hold pressure. Yet the system is running. For now. A vice president near the window gave a quiet laugh. Evelyn noticed and allowed the corner of her mouth to lift. Mr. Mercer, companies do not become successful by paying every person who claims they saved the day. Daniel's gaze moved toward the rain beyond the glass. He thought of Lily's field trip envelope waiting on their kitchen counter. $38 due by Monday. He thought of the nearly empty gas tank in his truck and the lunch he had skipped so she could have fresh fruit in her school bag. Still, his voice remained steady. I am not claiming anything. I replaced what was broken. Evelyn folded her hands. And I am declining the charge. The room grew still. Daniel could hear the faint ticking of an Art Deco clock behind her, each second landing with measured precision. He placed the invoice on the table, beside a silver pen worth more than his monthly rent. Keep it, he said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You are walking away from your $40. Daniel turned toward the door. No, ma'am. You are. Before leaving, he paused and looked back at the engineering report displayed on the wall. A yellow warning symbol flickered once beside the pressure graph, then disappeared. No one else seemed to notice. Daniel did. He also knew the repaired switch was only the first weak point in a chain carrying enough heat to destroy an entire production run. He had tried to warn them. Evelyn had chosen pride over $40. And somewhere beneath 40 floors of glass and steel, the system began to climb toward a number no one in that room was prepared to pay. Daniel Mercer rode the service elevator down alone, listening to its cables murmur behind the paneled walls. By the time the doors opened into the underground garage, his phone had already vibrated twice. The first message came from Lily, asking whether he remembered the poster board for her science project. The second came from Grant Dynamics Accounting, confirming that his invoice had been closed without payment. Daniel read both messages, answered only his daughter, and walked toward his aging pickup beneath rows of cold overhead lamps. He had learned long ago that dignity was not the same as surrender. Sometimes it meant knowing which battles deserved words and which deserved time. 20 minutes later, he stopped at a neighborhood supply store and counted the cash in his wallet. He bought the poster board, a box of colored markers, and a small carton of strawberries Lily loved. The purchase left him with $11 and some change. At home, their modest brick duplex smelled of tomato soup and toasted bread. Lily sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, her dark blonde hair tied in a crooked ponytail, surrounded by paper planets and handwritten labels. She looked up with the kind of smile that made exhaustion feel temporary. Did the important people like your repair? She asked. Daniel placed the supplies beside her. They liked that the machine started working. Did they pay you? He hesitated only long enough for her to notice. We are handling it. Lily studied his face, then pushed half of her sandwich toward him. You can have this. Daniel smiled softly. That is yours, kiddo. I know, she said. That is why it counts. Across the city, Evelyn Grant remained on the 42nd floor, framed by amber evening light and the restless glow of financial displays. She was strikingly beautiful, with pale green eyes, carefully arranged chestnut hair, and a composed expression that had carried her through hostile boardrooms and unforgiving interviews. Yet when the conference room emptied, confidence gave way to irritation. Daniel's calm departure bothered her more than anger would have. He had not pleaded. He had not threatened. He had looked at her as though the decision belonged entirely to her conscience. Evelyn opened the maintenance report and found his handwritten note beneath the replacement record. Secondary regulator showing delayed response. Full load test recommended before production cycle. She pressed the intercom. Get Martin Hale in here. The plant director arrived several minutes later, adjusting his tie. Evelyn turned the monitor toward him. Is this warning serious? Martin glanced at the note and shrugged. Mercer is an independent technician. People like him protect themselves by documenting every possibility. Did your engineers inspect it? The system passed the automatic. Check. That was not my question. Martin's smile weakened. They will review it tomorrow morning. Evelyn looked toward the clock. The first production cycle was scheduled to begin at midnight. Move it to tomorrow, she said. Martin stiffened. That delay would trigger penalties with 3 clients. How much? Nearly $2 million. The number hung between them. Evelyn considered Daniel's worn jacket, his quiet warning, and the tiny invoice that had become a matter of pride. Then she closed the report. Proceed tonight. For hours later, while Daniel helped Lily glue Saturn's rings onto her poster, a silent alert appeared on the control panel beneath Grant Dynamics. The secondary regulator failed to respond. Temperature readings began drifting upward, 1 degree at a time, and no one in the control room understood why. At 12:17 in the morning, the first alarm flashed across the control room at Grant Dynamics, then vanished before the night supervisor could record it. Run the diagnostic again. It already cleared. Then why is the pressure climbing? No one answered. Beneath the testing floor, pumps strained against an unstable regulator while temperature readings drifted farther from their approved range. Martin Hale arrived wearing an overcoat over his dress shirt, his face tense from the urgent call. He studied the monitors, ordered a software reset, and watched every warning disappear for exactly 42 seconds. When the red symbols returned, the technician stopped pretending the problem was minor. Across town, Daniel was washing 2 soup bowls when his phone rang. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch beside her unfinished model of the solar system, one hand resting near a paper moon. Daniel glanced at the unfamiliar number and let it ring twice before answering. Daniel Mercer. Martin's voice came quickly. We need you at the facility. Daniel dried his hands with a dish towel. Call your engineering team. They are here. Then they have what they need. A pause followed, filled with distant voices and the sharp pulse of an electronic alarm. The secondary regulator is not responding, Martin said. The system keeps rejecting manual commands. Daniel looked toward Lily. Her school backpack leaned against the wall, patched at one corner with silver tape. Did you shut down production? We cannot complete the shutdown sequence. Did you isolate the western cooling loop? The controls will not release it. Daniel closed his eyes. The failure had moved exactly where he feared it would. You ignored the inspection. Martin lowered his voice. This is not the time. That is what people say when the truth becomes expensive. Before Martin could respond, another voice entered the call. Calm, controlled, unmistakable. Evelyn Grant. Mr. Mercer, what will it take for you to come back? Daniel stepped into the hallway, so he would not wake Lily. I told your company what the system needed, and I made the wrong decision. Her admission came without decoration. For the first time that evening, the noise behind her seemed to fade. I am asking you to help us correct it. Daniel listened to the rain tapping against the kitchen window. He could demand an apology in front of the board. He could name any price and let fear do the negotiating. Instead, he asked, how many employees are inside the testing wing? 31. Clear the floor. Keep the control crew behind the safety doors. Do not restart anything until I arrive. Evelyn released a breath. How soon can you be here? Daniel glanced at the clock, then at his sleeping daughter. 25 minutes. He called their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, who came over in a robe and winter slippers. Daniel covered Lily with a blanket, left a note beside her science project, and drove through empty Chicago streets beneath sheets of cold rain. When he reached Grant Dynamics, the service entrance was unlocked and 3 executives were waiting beside the security desk. None of them laughed this time. Evelyn stood at the front, still remarkably composed, though fatigue had softened the authority in her pale green eyes. She held Daniel's unpaid invoice in one hand. "I should have listened," she said. Daniel walked past her toward the secured elevator. "You can regret it later." The doors opened. A warning tone rolled upward from below. He turned to the gathered engineers and spoke with quiet precision. "Show me every reading from the moment production began." Minutes later, Daniel found the hidden sequence no automated test had recognized. One defective switch had triggered a false correction, which forced the main cooling array to compensate until the entire batch became unstable. Martin stared at the projected figures. "Can we save the production run?" Daniel studied the rising loss estimate, now passing $8 million. "Not all of it." Evelyn's expression tightened. "How much can you save?" Daniel reached for the manual control panel. "That depends on whether everyone follows instructions now. Cut power to line 4. The backup system will engage. Let it engage, but keep the western loop isolated. That will ruin the entire battery batch." Daniel did not look away from the control panel. "The batch is already gone. I am trying to save the building." The control room fell quiet except for the steady pulse of warning signals and the rush of air through the ventilation ducts. Evelyn stood several feet behind him, her chestnut hair no longer perfectly arranged after hours of tension, yet she remained extraordinarily beautiful beneath the harsh industrial lighting. Her pale green eyes moved from Daniel's hands to the rising figures on the main display. $9 million, $10 million, $11 million. Each number appeared like a verdict. Martin Hale stepped closer. "There has to be another option." Daniel adjusted the manual valve sequence and watched the pressure graph hesitate. "There was another option yesterday." Martin lowered his gaze. Evelyn did not. "Tell us what you need," she said. Daniel pointed toward 3 engineers. "You, confirm the emergency reservoir is full. You, disconnect the automated command link. You, monitor the north intake and report every 5-degree change." The engineers moved without argument. No one saw a contractor anymore. They saw the only person in the room who understood what the machines were trying to say. Daniel had spent years repairing systems that wealthy executives noticed only when they stopped serving them. He knew the language of vibration, delay, heat, and strain. More importantly, he knew that equipment rarely failed without warning. People simply became too proud, too rushed, or too distracted to listen. The loss estimate reached $12 million just as the western loop finally released. A deep mechanical hum traveled through the floor, then softened. The temperature line slowed. 1 degree fell, then another. The red symbols changed to amber. Martin stared at the screen. "It is stabilizing." "Not yet," Daniel replied. "Wait for the pressure." 31 seconds passed. No one spoke. Even Evelyn's board members, watching through a secure video connection, remained motionless inside their separate frames. The pressure gauge descended into the safe range. Daniel removed his hand from the controls. "Now it is stable." Relief moved through the room in restrained breaths rather than celebration. They had lost the production run, 3 client contracts, and a week of operations, but the facility itself had been protected. Evelyn looked at the final figure and then at the man she had dismissed over the price of a replacement part. "You saved far more than we lost," she said. Daniel gathered his tools. "That does not make the loss necessary." "No," she answered quietly. "It makes it mine." Martin began explaining how the automatic diagnostic had concealed the warning, but Evelyn raised one hand. "The machine did not refuse the inspection. We did." Her words settled over the room with more weight than anger could have carried. She turned toward Daniel. "I owe you an apology. You owe your employees better judgment. You are right. And you owe me $40. For the first time that night, a faint smile touched Evelyn's face. It held no arrogance, only humility learned at an extraordinary price. She reached for her phone, but Daniel shook his head. "Accounting can handle it during business hours." Then he checked the time. Lily would wake in less than 2 hours. expecting help with Saturn's rings before school. Daniel walked toward the elevator, leaving the billionaire chief executive officer beside $12 million of proof that respect was never the expensive choice. Dad, you missed the blue ring. Saturn has more than one. Then we need more glitter. Daniel smiled as Lily held up the crooked planet, unaware that her father had spent the night preventing an industrial disaster. Morning light entered their kitchen through thin curtains, warming the chipped table and the scattered pieces of her science project. Fresh coffee filled the small room with a familiar comfort, while Mrs. Alvarez slept in the armchair after refusing to leave until Daniel returned safely. He had changed clothes, packed Lily's lunch, and said nothing about the executives who had followed his instructions, as though every word carried the weight of law. At 7:30, a black sedan stopped beside the curb. Lily pressed her face near the window. Someone important is here. Daniel looked outside and saw Evelyn Grant step onto the sidewalk. In daylight, away from the towering headquarters that carried her family name, she appeared less untouchable. She wore a charcoal coat over a cream dress, and her remarkable beauty drew the attention of two neighbors collecting their newspapers. Yet there was no entourage, no assistant, and no photographer. She carried a white envelope and the rejected invoice. Daniel opened the door before she could knock. You found my address. Your vendor record listed it. That record also listed the amount your company owed. Evelyn accepted the rebuke without resistance. May I come in? Daniel glanced toward Lily, who was watching with open curiosity. For 5 minutes. Evelyn entered carefully, taking in the narrow hallway, the children's drawings, and the pair of repaired boots beside the radiator. Lily approached with Saturn held in both hands. Are you my dad's boss? No, Evelyn answered. Last night, he was mine. Daniel turned toward her, surprised by the honesty. Evelyn offered Lily a respectful smile, then placed the envelope on the table. Inside was a check for the unpaid repair, reimbursement for the emergency call, and a handwritten apology signed by every executive who had ignored Daniel's warning. He removed the check and examined the total. This is too much. It covers your time. My emergency rate is not this high. The remaining amount is an acknowledgement. Daniel returned it to the envelope. Respect does not require a bonus after someone fails publicly. Evelyn's expression tightened, not from offense, but from shame. She looked at the cardboard planets and the strawberries beside Lily's lunch bag. What does it require? Daniel answered without raising his voice. Pay people fairly before you need them. Listen before the warning becomes a loss. Do not confuse someone's position with their value. Lily placed Saturn on the table. My dad says everybody knows something you do not. Evelyn looked at the child, then at Daniel. Your father is right. A car horn sounded outside, reminding Evelyn of the board meeting waiting downtown. She reached into her coat and produced a second document. The board wants Martin removed and the maintenance division rebuilt. I want you to lead the review. Daniel did not touch the offer. I repair systems. I do not rescue executives from consequences. This is not rescue. Her voice remained level, but something sincere had entered it. It is a chance to prevent the next mistake. Daniel studied the woman who had dismissed him hours earlier. For once, wealth was not speaking for her. Humility was. Before he could respond, Lily lifted a blue marker. You can help with the rings while he thinks. Evelyn looked toward Daniel for permission. He stepped aside. The billionaire sat at the modest kitchen table, rolled up her sleeves, and began coloring Saturn beside an 8-year-old girl. Daniel watched in silence, realizing the night had cost her company a fortune, but the morning was asking her to learn something money had never taught her. Daniel did not answer Evelyn's offer that morning. He drove Lily to school, watched her carry Saturn through the front doors, and spent the next several hours inspecting furnaces in 3 apartment buildings on the south side. Work had always made difficult choices simpler. A machine revealed what was wrong if a person listened long enough, but people often hid their damage behind titles, polished manners, and expensive walls. Shortly after noon, Evelyn called. The board meets at 2. Then you should prepare. They intend to blame Martin alone. Daniel tightened a valve beneath an aging boiler. He ignored the warning. So did I. Her voice held none of the certainty she once used to control a room. They want one person to carry the failures so investors believe the company has solved everything. Has it? Silence answered him. Daniel wiped his hands and stepped into the hallway, where winter sunlight crossed the worn carpet in narrow bands. "I will attend under 3 conditions," he said. "Name them." "No private settlement, no false report, and every technician who raised a concern keeps their job." Evelyn responded immediately. "Agreed. You should speak to your attorneys before promising that. I am speaking as the chief executive officer. That position did not help you listen yesterday." The truth landed without cruelty, which made it harder to resist. Evelyn inhaled slowly. "Then I am speaking as the woman responsible." At 2 o'clock, Daniel entered the executive boardroom wearing a clean work shirt, dark jeans, and the same repaired jacket Lily had stitched. 12 directors sat around a curved walnut table. Several glanced at his boots. One examined his name on the visitor badge as though trying to understand why a repairman had been invited into their private judgment. Evelyn stood near the windows. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her extraordinary beauty was matched by a new restraint in her expression. She did not appear diminished. She appeared honest. Martin sat at the far end, surrounded by printed reports and legal counsel. "This is unnecessary," one director said. "The internal review is complete." Daniel took the empty chair beside Martin. "Then you will not mind answering questions." The director frowned. "Mr. Mercer, this company lost a considerable amount because a plant manager failed to follow procedure." Daniel opened a maintenance log. "Who denied the full inspection?" No one spoke. "Who approved production after the warning was documented?" Evelyn stepped forward. "I did." A murmur moved around the table. The chairman leaned toward her. "Evelyn, counsel advised against making personal admissions." Counsel was not inside that control room. She placed the rejected invoice beside the quarterly report. "We lost money because our culture taught managers that saving $40 mattered more than respecting experienced workers." Martin looked at her with visible surprise. Daniel turned to the directors. "Your technicians reported unstable readings 6 weeks ago. Their supervisor removed those notes from the final summary because delays affected executive bonuses." The chairman's face hardened. "Can you prove that?" Daniel slid copies of the original service records across the table. 3 signatures appeared beneath the warnings. One belonged to the chairman himself. The room became so quiet that the faint movement of the heating vents seemed loud. Evelyn read the page, then lifted her gaze toward the man who had taught her to measure every decision by profit. "You knew," she said. The chairman closed the folder. "I knew there was a manageable risk." Daniel's reply remained even. "A risk is manageable only when the people carrying it are told the truth." Evelyn moved to Daniel's side. "The review will continue publicly. All deleted reports will be restored, and no technician will be punished for speaking honestly." "You cannot make that decision alone," the chairman warned. Evelyn looked around the table, then placed her hand upon the voting ledger. "Then let us find out who still believes dignity is too expensive. Call the vote." "Evelyn, reconsider." "I already have." The chairman's warning carried across the boardroom, but Evelyn Grant did not lower her eyes. Daniel remained beside the voting ledger while 12 directors studied the restored maintenance records spread before them. Outside the windows, afternoon clouds pressed low over Chicago, turning the river into a narrow ribbon of gray. Inside, leather chairs shifted, pens clicked, and careers quietly balanced against conscience. The first vote supported an independent investigation. The second protected every employee who had reported safety concerns. The third removed control of the internal review from the chairman's office. 7 hands rose. Then 8. The chairman stared at his daughter as though she had betrayed an inheritance rather than defended the truth. "You are damaging the company your family built," he said. Evelyn's voice softened, but her resolve did not. A company built on silence was already damaged. Martin Hale removed his glasses. "I approve the altered report," he admitted. Several directors turned toward him. "I was told the launch could not be delayed. I convinced myself the risk was small because everyone above me wanted it to be small." Daniel closed the maintenance log. That is how preventable failures become expensive traditions. No one challenged him. By evening, the board had suspended the chairman pending review, retained Martin as a cooperating witness, and authorized a complete inspection of every production site owned by Grant Dynamics. Evelyn asked Daniel to direct the technical audit for 90 days with full independence and authority to stop operations wherever conditions were unsafe. He read the agreement twice. No executive can overrule a shutdown. Not even me. Every contractor receives payment within 10 business days. Yes. And the workers who sign those warnings receive written protection? Evelyn placed her signature beneath the final condition. Already approved. Daniel accepted the pen. Then I will do it. The news reached the plant before sunrise. Technicians who had spent years being treated as background names found Evelyn waiting near the employee entrance without a podium or prepared speech. She apologized plainly, answered difficult questions, and promised that no production deadline would outrank a documented concern again. Daniel stood near the back, observing rather than seeking credit. Respect had never interested him as a performance. He wanted it installed into the system, where it could protect people after the attention faded. Later that afternoon, Evelyn visited the audit floor wearing safety glasses and practical shoes. She listened as Daniel explained a pressure map, asked precise questions, and wrote every answer herself. You learn quickly, he said. I ignored the first lesson. Then do not waste the second. A small smile appeared on her face. Lily said something similar when I colored outside Saturn's ring. Daniel almost laughed. His phone vibrated with a photograph from Lily's teacher. Her project stood beneath a blue ribbon, and Lily held a certificate reading Most Thoughtful Presentation. Beneath the picture was her message. Everybody clapped, but I saved you a cookie. Evelyn noticed the warmth in his expression. She won. She shared what she knew. That sounds familiar. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket. Across the factory, workers began shutting down equipment for the first honest inspection the company had conducted in years. The process would be costly, slow, and visible to investors. Yet as Evelyn watched Daniel move from station to station, speaking to each technician with the same attention he gave a director, she understood something her wealth had never taught her. Rebuilding trust did not begin with a grand announcement. It began by paying attention when an ordinary voice said something was wrong. 2 weeks into the audit, Daniel found a pattern no executive wanted to see. Maintenance requests from 4 facilities had been delayed whenever repairs threatened quarterly targets, and each postponed order had been redirected through a consulting firm connected to the chairman. This is not carelessness. No, Daniel said. It is a system. How long has it been happening? Evelyn asked. At least 3 years. The conference table between them was covered with purchase orders, inspection notes, and payment records. Morning traffic moved far below the windows, but the room itself felt suspended outside time. Evelyn read every page without looking away. The woman who once measured problems by their effect on a balance sheet now saw the names of technicians who had been ignored, vendors who had waited months for payment, and families whose livelihoods depended on promises her company had failed to keep. My father approved these transfers, she said. Daniel nodded. He also rewarded managers who kept repair costs below unrealistic limits. And I praised those numbers at every annual meeting. Her voice nearly broke, but she steadied it. I helped protect something I never understood. Daniel gathered the documents into separate folders. Understanding comes with responsibility. What would you do? Tell the truth before someone else tells it for you. By noon, the legal department had prepared a statement designed to minimize damage. It blamed former leadership, described the losses as isolated, and avoided mentioning Evelyn's decision to continue production. She read the draft once, placed it face down, and walked into the press room with no script. Daniel watched from the rear beside several plant workers. Cameras clicked. Reporters called her name. Evelyn approached the microphone wearing a simple navy suit, her luminous features composed but unguarded. The failures at Grant Dynamics were not isolated, she began. They were encouraged by a culture that valued appearances over warnings, speed over judgment, and authority over respect. I participated in that culture. I am responsible for changing it. Questions erupted. She answered each one. She confirmed the independent review. She announced repayment to contractors, new protections for employees, and the suspension of executives tied to altered reports. When asked whether she expected to remain chief executive officer, she paused. Leadership is not proven by keeping a title. It is proven by accepting the cost of the truth. The room went still. That evening, Grant Dynamics stock fell sharply, 2 directors resigned, and several clients demanded explanations. Yet hundreds of employees sent messages supporting the reforms. One technician wrote that it was the first time he believed speaking honestly would not end his career. Evelyn forwarded the note to Daniel with only 4 words. This is why we continue. He read it while sitting in Lily's school auditorium, where paper stars hung from the ceiling and folding chairs filled every row. Lily stood backstage preparing to present her project at the district science showcase. Evelyn arrived moments before the program began, carrying no briefcase and accompanied by no staff. "You came," Lily whispered when she saw her. "I promised I would." The 3 of them sat together after the presentation, sharing the cookie Lily had saved. Around them, parents talked, children laughed, and someone played an uneven melody on the old piano near the stage. Evelyn looked at Daniel. "The board offered me a way to stay if I end the public review. What did you say?" She watched Lily divide the cookie into 3 careful pieces. "I said no." Daniel accepted his portion. Nothing dramatic followed. No applause, no announcement, no reward. Only a quiet moment in a crowded school hall, where a billionaire finally chose integrity without knowing what it would give her in return. 3 months later, Grant Dynamics held its annual meeting in the same tower where Daniel had once stood with a rejected invoice in his hand. The building looked unchanged from the street, but the company inside it was no longer governed by the same silence. Every maintenance request was now visible to employees. Every safety concern required a written response, and every outside contractor received automatic confirmation when payment was approved. The reforms had cost money, delayed production, and angered investors who preferred clean numbers to difficult truth. Yet the factories were safer, employee turnover had fallen, and 2 major clients had renewed their contracts after reviewing the independent audit. Evelyn entered the meeting without the privileges that had once announced her presence. She was no longer chief executive officer. The board had removed her after she refused to end the investigation, and her father had resigned before the final report exposed years of concealed warnings. Still, she carried herself with uncommon grace. Her chestnut hair rested neatly against a soft ivory jacket, and her pale green eyes held a steadiness that no title had ever given her. Daniel sat beside Lily near the rear of the auditorium. His 90-day assignment had ended that morning, and the board had offered him a permanent executive position. He had declined the corner office but accepted leadership of a new independent safety council, provided that half its members came from factory floors and repair crews. When the chairman of the reorganized board approached the podium, conversations faded. "This company nearly lost more than money," he said. "It nearly lost the trust of everyone whose work made our success possible." A large screen displayed the names of employees and contractors who had documented concerns before the failed production run. Daniel's name appeared last. Applause rose across the auditorium, but he remained seated. Lily leaned toward him. "You should stand." "Why?" "Because they finally listened." Daniel looked at the workers standing throughout the room. "Then they should stand too." Lily climbed onto her chair and raised her small hand toward the screen. One technician stood, then another. Within seconds, hundreds of people were on their feet, not honoring one man, but recognizing every voice that had once been dismissed. Evelyn turned from the front row and met Daniel's gaze. There was gratitude in her expression, along with something gentler that had grown through shared responsibility, school projects, difficult meetings, and quiet dinners at his kitchen table. After the ceremony, she found him near the service elevators. "The board wants me to return as chief executive officer next year," she said, "under the new oversight rules. Do you want to return?" "Only if I can lead differently." Daniel glanced at Lily, who was explaining Saturn's rings to a group of engineers. "Then begin by remembering who taught you." Evelyn smiled. "A stubborn repairman? An 8-year-old girl with glitter." She laughed softly, and the sound carried none of the distance she once used as armor. Before leaving, Evelyn handed Daniel a plain white envelope. Inside was the original invoice, now stamped paid, with a handwritten note beneath the amount. $40 for the part. $12 million for the lesson. Respect beyond measure. Daniel folded the paper and placed it in his jacket. He had never needed the world to call him powerful. He had only needed enough courage to remain honest when powerful people refused to listen. Beside him stood his daughter, proud without fully understanding why, and a woman who had lost authority long enough to discover character. The elevator doors opened. No cameras waited. No audience followed. The 3 of them stepped inside together, while Behind them, an entire company continued rebuilding itself around one simple truth. Dignity is never the costliest choice, but ignoring it often is.